I would expect that in a perfect world where everybody's operating in perfect good faith and everybody has perfect insight, I would expect the number of people identifying as trans to increase regardless, just as awareness increased around the issue. So I don't know what that increase would look like, but I would expect there to be some increase regardless of everything else, just because of the awareness of it.
Yeah.
That would be one thing. Another thing is, I do agree with you that the delusion thing is scary. This is kind of a question I always ask, like whenever I get professional therapists on stream.
Okay, so I guess if I were to rephrase my question to you, I guess it's like, how does society respond if it turns out to be a delusion? Because I guess like the concern would be.
Okay, wait, hold on. I'm just trying to figure out. I don't know if you're scared to answer the
question.
question.
Okay, I need to take a step back. I apologize.
And you had said that the therapist's job is probably to validate that person.
No, I would never say that. Or what do you mean? Hi, what's up, buddy?
Hey, nothing much. Just kind of hanging out, been watching the stream all day, been super excited about this.
Oh boy. Well, where are you from?
Yeah, I'm US. I don't know if I want to dox myself. I don't know how specific I want to go into those things, especially with the topic.
Sure. Can you say if you're like from like the South or from like the Northeast, or do you just want to leave it at United States?
Yeah. So I'm from Northeast US.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Gotcha. Like Boston? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just fucking. Okay. All right. What did you email me for? What do you want to chat about?
Okay, yeah. One of the things that I find kind of interesting is that if we explore the idea of like being trans as a delusion.
Gotcha. Wait, real quick, do you want to introduce yourself and who you are and what you do and everything? Like, not.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, just so.
My name is Trevor. I'll go by first name at least, and then I am a social worker and a mental health therapist.
Mm-hmm. What do you do for social work?
What was that?
What do you do for social work?
So that is what my degree and licensure is in. So I have I'm a licensed social worker, and then my profession is that I am a therapist.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Okay. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, no, so I feel like there's a whole part of this conversation that happens where we've almost like taken a step forward where we haven't taken a look at the step back as to the possibility if like some people that are trans are also experiencing a delusion.
Gotcha. What do you mean by that more specifically?
Okay, so are you familiar with what a delusion is in like the clinical sense of the term?
False belief? I'd know.
Okay, so I have the DSM here. The definition within the DSM is it is a fixed belief that is not amenable to change in the light of conflicting evidence.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So an example that like someone might use for this is that if somebody has a cup of water and they say, okay, so this water is poisoned. If you were to take that cup of water and like drink it and go, see, it's not poison, I'm doing just fine. Their brain almost seems to find a way to wrap around to something else that still makes the delusion true, but not necessarily that statement. So maybe it's like that poison only affects you.
Yeah, I gotcha. So like a conspiracy theorist might be somebody that adheres to delusion, right? Like the grand deep state controls the world. Well, why didn't they control this? Well, they couldn't control that. Well, why not do that? Well, that didn't work. Or well, where is it? Well, they hide from this, right? There's the delusion will kind of mold to fit whatever the challenging statement is without actually changing the delusion itself, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
So I guess like part of it is that I'm curious if it's more of a combination of that there are people that experience a delusion, and then we have kind of become more accepting as a society, and as that happens, we start to have more people kind of questioning it and seeing that they kind of identify with some of the ideas that go along with it. Like I think at even some point I've heard you talk about like questioning if you're non-binary. Can you tell me a little bit of, like I'm a little curious about that. What's kind of been your experience with exploring gender, if you don't mind?
Yeah, no problem. I mean, I have like a very, I'm probably more detached than most people from a lot of parts of my identity for whatever reason. I don't know why, the type of person I am. I think gender is just another one of those things to where I don't feel like a particular attachment to my gender. I just don't really care that much. If I think about all the qualities that like define me, like being male or masculine is not anywhere on that list. If I woke up as a woman, I don't really think I care that much. Right now, I probably would actually because I'm doing a lot of weight training. But other than that, like it's not really something that affects me that much. I think I could live life as a woman and be okay.
Yeah. for you, like, what does it mean to be a man or a woman?
I don't know. I don't really have a lot of fixed things in my mind relating to those two things. Aside from like some fundamental like physiological things, there's not really much there.
Okay, and I guess have you ever heard of Occam's razor before?
Yeah.
What is your understanding of Occam's razor?
Oh man. The layman's understanding is that like if you the simplest explanation is always the best. There's a slightly more complicated formation of that where it's like if you have some statement that could be explained by multiple things, they could be collapsed into like singular explanations or something. It's typically or something like that, like no redundant explanation or something. But like basically like the simplest explanation is probably the correct one. Is generally how it's referred to. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. My understanding as well. So I guess like it almost feels like we've never even been able to test it as a hypothesis if it is a delusion, or if that there are some people that experience it as a delusion. It seems like the standard of care for the last 20 or so years, at least, has been gender affirming care. So if someone comes in with gender dysphoria, it's typically we can look at all sorts of treatments and what to do from there for that individual. And then it seems like around 2010 or so, we started to see like a large increase in people identifying as transgender. So we can, I guess, like the way I see it, we can either look at it, maybe there are people that are transgender that aren't really identified, or there's like some other cause. I think the UK said something around like there's been a 4,000% increase in cases or something like that over time, which I wouldn't be shocked about. So I kind of want to hear what your thoughts are on that.
I mean, there's a few things. There's a lot of this is pretty complicated. So on one, I would expect that in a perfect world where everybody's operating in perfect good faith and everybody has perfect insight, I would expect the number of people identifying as trans to increase regardless, just as awareness increased around the issue. So I don't know what that increase would look like, but I would expect there to be some increase regardless of everything else, just because of the awareness of it. That would be one thing. Another thing is, I do agree with you that the delusion thing is scary. This is kind of a question I always ask, like whenever I get professional therapists on stream.
Actually, can I?
Yeah, go.
Because there was something I really wanted to ask you about that. Is like, what do you think the consequences are if it's a delusion? Like, what do you think society would happen in society if it turned out that being trans is a delusion and a societal trend?
Like, hold on, I'm just curious. Like, a person being trans, or like all of trans is a delusion?
No, that like it kind of starts at the basis of being a delusion, and then we have well-meaning people that are trying to be supportive. Because I think it's really easy to accommodate somebody that's trans.
Really?
I think it's really easy for me to kind of change the pronouns to use.
Well, yeah, but the accommodations we typically look for are going to be like medical as well, which I would argue are quite difficult now.
I can agree with that. I guess like there's no impact on the outside world at that point.
I'm still curious though, like, in what you said, in terms of like are you talking about the delusion is like all trans people are delusional, or that more people will go into therapists that are delusional about being trans?
I think that it's a combination of that. There are probably some people that experience a delusion, and then there's probably some people that have been impressed, or that it's been impressionable for some way, shape, or form. And it's just a very strongly held belief of theirs. Sure.
I'm just trying to understand because the question changes significantly in terms of like, what if all of trans stuff is fake versus what if just some people are delusional about being trans? Because those are fundamentally two really different questions, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So which one were you asking? That's what I'm trying to figure
out. No, I guess so. What I see is I feel like it's a combination between there are some people that experience the delusion of being trans, and then we also have a lot of people that are kind of coming in and seeing this thing that they identify with and just kind of going with it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, like that can definitely happen. My feeling is that this is probably happening with almost anything that gets popular on the internet, right? So I would imagine that like there must be some frustration of somebody comes into the office and they say like, hey, like I think I have XYZ mental illness, like ADHD or general anxiety disorder, whatever. And when you ask them like, oh, well, can you describe it? They literally give you like the 8-point criteria from the DSM-5. And I feel like the feeling there would be like, okay, holy shit. It's going to be really hard to get this person to introspect on themselves, because it sounds like they've already done some reading on this. They're probably pretty convinced that they have this, and this is going to be a fixed thing in their mind that's going to be almost impossible to talk them out of. So I imagine that probably can happen to some extent with like people that think they're trans but they aren't actually. There are other problems going on, same as like people that think they have ADHD or GAD or major depressive disorder or whatever, but they don't actually. They've just read a lot online and they feel like it fits.
Okay, so I guess if I were to rephrase my question to you, I guess it's like, how does society respond if it turns out to be a delusion? Because I guess like the concern would be.
Okay, wait, hold on. I'm just trying to figure out. I don't know if you're scared to answer the question.
Okay, I need to take a step back. I apologize.
No, yeah. When you say if society figures out it's a delusion, that like trans people aren't real, that it's all delusional, or that some people are going into therapists and they're individually under a delusion. I'm trying to figure out what you're saying is the delusional thing, so that I understand how to answer the question.
Okay, I think it would be helpful if I were to back this up then, is that I think at a base level that prior to like 2010, we saw very, very few cases of gender dysphoria or people that were trans, like at least in the medical field.
Okay.
It seems to me like those cases could probably be attributed to delusion at certain points, or at least for some of them.
For the early cases that came in with gender dysphoria?
I don't think that those are representative of the modern trans community, though. I don't think that the majority of the modern trans community is delusional.
Well, what do you think the majority of them are then?
I think that it is a strongly held belief because it's something that they found that they could identify with.
Is that?
And
but if there is no
the difference between a delusion and a not delusion is that there can be some level of questioning and not a delusion.
Gotcha.
So
but
I
you
guess,
think
like,
that,
I think
but
that
the phenomenon of like gender dysphoria or like transgenderedness is like, that's not like a real thing. You think it's all kind of like a socially driven thing that people are identifying with for one reason or another?
I think it could be a lot of socially driven, because it seems like if we were to take that Occam's razor approach, what if we were to look at it as, hey, it is simply there's the biological sexes and the gender dysphoria. Yeah, we could feel bad about that gender. Maybe it gets to the point that it becomes a delusion where you may think that you are the opposite gender. I'm understanding that this conversation is invalidating a lot of experiences.
No, that's fine. It's weird having an open, honest conversation. Fuck it, don't worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's why I'm trying not to look at chat right now. I'm sure it's a disaster at the moment.
I guess that like, so there would have to be like, we would have to look at like clinical and then research experience on this. So like if I were to appeal to the quasi clinical side, so like the personal stories and anecdotes that I've gotten from people, it seems to be the case that there's some phenomenon that exists where people are having like certain feelings or experiences or whatever that are alleviated further on by hormones or by other types of like gender affirming care or sex reassignment surgery or gender affirming surgeries. If that was the case, that there is some underlying phenomenon that exists, and there are people that we have like treatment regimens for that improve their outcomes, then I guess by virtue of Occam's razor, I would have to imagine that the therapeutic model that we've developed for understanding that particular thing seems to be effective, and I would need something extra to believe that it's all delusional, I guess. That seems the biggest argument, or the biggest thing that I feel like would be like make it not delusional is I feel like a pretty common story from some trans people is they have horrible feelings about themselves, they have horrible feelings about their bodies, they end up going through puberty, they don't make it to their 20s, where for the first time they're introduced really to the concept of being trans, and then after that introduction, like retroactively, they can start to see that like, oh well, this actually explains a lot of my experiences. Which to me kind of points a little bit away from delusions. Now, if it was the case that like almost nobody was trans until they like met a trans friend or somebody in college and they're like, oh, actually, wait, hold on, this is cooler, which I think can happen sometimes, I would be a little bit more suspect of that. But it seems to be the case that there is some like underlying experience that's happening that a lot of people don't even find out until later in life, like is explained by being trans. So it's hard for me to think that they're having a delusion, a fixed belief about something that they don't even know they can have a belief about, I guess.
Okay. And you mentioned like that they're alleviated by hormones, and I feel like this is like the symptoms tend to get alleviated by hormones, and this tends to be the barrier that we run into, is that we do have effective treatment right now. We do have something that is shown to work. I guess the question, or my problem is, it feels like we've kind of stagnated, and we've never been able to ask in a meaningful way, is it a delusion, to be able to test this idea?
Well, I think the problem is that, like, I don't even know if clinically, like, delusion would, oh my god, what am I going here? Is delusion like the correct word here? It almost hints at, like, are we really saying, is it a delusion, or are we saying that, like, it's something that might be socialized from an early age or something? Because, like, how do we figure? How would we
can
even?
I specify that I don't think that all trans people
or even,
are
I'm just
delusional?
curious, like, how would you figure out if it was a delusion when there's like a personal, like, feeling about something? How would you figure that out?
Okay. I guess, like, this is where I kind of feel like we fucked ourselves as a society, and I think that there just isn't a solution to that. I think that we won't ever be able to differentiate the two, and that's just simply what it is. And in my experience of working with people with delusions, that's kind of been the case, is that I can make the assumptions that these things that they're saying to me are delusions, and they're making these unreasonable assumptions, but at the same time, I'm not the one there. I can't say if the cops are stopping by the house or if they are going through your mail. I don't have the proof to deny that. But it doesn't also seem like there's proof there to suggest it either.
Well, I mean, like, if the therapies and everything are effective for some people, then
I guess, what are they effective at in your head or in your mind?
Alleviating gender dysphoria.
Yeah, they're good for alleviating that distress that comes from that, correct? So I guess, like, if we were to find a way to treat this in some other way, but I feel like we just can't test it because of the current standard of care, is within the current standard of care, they shut down the idea of it being a delusion right at the beginning. And it feels like this has been the conversation for the last 10 years.
I don't know if I agree with that. I feel like at one point in time, it was the same with gays and lesbians as well. I thought that the idea was conversion therapy. The idea that, like, we could just kind of talk people down from this and then move them out of that. I thought that was tried for quite a while in a lot of different areas, and there's like no success there.
So I think conversion therapy is also something that's different. I think that sorry, one moment. I'm trying to collect my thoughts here.
Yeah, no problem.
Conversion therapy for gay people is not the same as... It's not even... I don't want to even equate these things because they're not similar in that way. I guess, to me, does it feel like there is more past just kind of having whatever your gonads are develop into your current sex organs? Like, do you feel like there's something past that there is for the gender or sex experience?
I personally don't, because I just don't feel a strong attachment to it. But for other people, yeah, I think there are biological things, physiological things, and there are social things.
Okay, and do you feel like those things can fall within a normal spectrum of what can be, like, expected biologically, or do you think that that is now kind of something that we should look to help people transition to the opposite gender because we know that alleviates distress?
Can you repeat that, or what do you mean?
I guess, do we want to make the assumption that there's more, or do we make the assumption that it just simply is the way that it is?
There's more what?
To gender than just kind of like being a person that's able to reproduce and do natural selection just through that process.
Obama.
Wait, I'm trying to understand the question, I guess. Or can you rephrase it for me?
Yeah, so do you feel like there is more... Well, I guess I just asked this, but I guess it might just be a fundamental difference of, like, a view of the world. Like, if there is a greater experience to be, like, gender. Like, having a gender.
What is, like, the greater experience? What do you mean by that?
That you could be the opposite gender, or is it simply that it is what it is and you have the parts that you have?
are the parts here like brain parts or like body parts?
Body parts.
Well, it seems like it feels like the experience of gender seems to be something that happens in the brain and not necessarily something that happens like in the body. I feel like
I guess like when I say body parts, like I'm all interconnected with each other. Like, how does your brain even perceive your own body parts?
Well, I mean, we do a great deal of perceiving ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. Our own body parts. I mean, it seems to be the case that people have like an internal understanding or expression of their gender. And then they see themselves like in the mirror, or they see how their bodies are, and they have like some feeling of whether that's right or wrong.
Okay. Do you feel like this would be the same conversation if there weren't any gender norms?
Yes. Originally, I would have
Okay.
said no, but it seems to be the case that yeah. It feels like you kind of have like social dysphorias where there are like people just don't like the way they're treated. But then it seems like there is a very real, like, even if there was a trans person on an island with no other people around, there would be like this distinct feeling that something is wrong or off.
It feels to me like, because a lot of times, even when I work with people in alleviate, like if I work with someone with anxiety, let's say, is that we might work on alleviating some of the symptoms and kind of recognizing the thought patterns that go into that anxiety. At the end of the day, a lot of it seems like we want to alleviate symptoms. So I'm not even saying that gender affirming care is a bad thing. I think generally it's a very positive thing, especially if it's producing positive results. Do you think that there would ever be a way to test if it was a delusion?
I mean, like the
Especially
most,
because we wouldn't be able to differentiate like groups between if it is a delusion for this person and not for this person.
I'm still trying to understand, test if it's a delusion. When you say it, are you referring to the entire phenomenon as a whole or an individual patient?
An individual patient.
I think that it would be the same way you would test for literally every single, like mental disease, right? Like a lot of this relies on self-reporting, looking for congruency in like their stories with other people that have the same reported thing, right? Like, it's what you have to do with all of this stuff, right? Like, how do you know if somebody really has depression or really has ADHD or really has GAD? You kind of have to go by what they say and then compare it to what other people say that have the same thing, right?
Yeah, I guess a lot of it seems like, especially because it is self-reporting and diagnosing is not a perfect science, in the mental health field especially, that it would be helpful in future treatments to just at least explore other ideas.
Sure, of course. Which I think, truthfully, like gender affirming care should be that. You're helping somebody explore a lot about like themselves and the different parts of themselves. It's not just going in and saying, yes, you're trans, yes, you're trans, yes, you're trans. It's also like giving a person a place to explore their identity, their gender, to see how they relate to everything, to figure out like if that is actually what's going on, right?
Yeah, I guess the problem is that it sometimes does feel like it's a yes, you're trans situation in the field.
Sure, yeah, and I can understand the push towards that because a lot of people were worried that at one point in time it was a little bit too gatekeepy, and maybe now it's a little bit too open, but...
Because I was talking with my supervisor and kind of getting his feel on the subject, and he himself is a little bit more of a conservative guy, and his view is like, hey, he just doesn't feel like he knows enough about it, so he doesn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole, and just
Sure.
kind of pushes it off to someone that is willing to.
Sure.
So I feel like there hasn't necessarily been the argument because it's been so adamantly defended that, hey, that the experience that they are having is valid and that we should treat it as we currently are.
Yeah, I mean, I don't deny that I think that there's been a little bit too much pushing on one side, and it makes it hard to have, like, open and healthy conversations about this stuff, right?
Yeah, I guess, like, do you feel like there's any way that we can move the conversation forward?
I mean, a lot of public dialogue, but obviously it's going to be difficult, right?
Yeah, and where do you feel like the public discourse is at the moment?
I mean, it probably leans a little bit more too much to the, like, affirmative side, is what it seems to be right now. But I mean, it depends on the area too. Like maybe like in the most like kind of like activist communities, it's a little bit too much to the affirmative side. But like depending on the community you're in, like conservative communities, like these people still don't even think that trans people are a real thing. So I mean, it probably is going to depend like I would be uncomfortable stating like this is the average across the U.S. because it's going to be super specific to what area you're in specifically, right?
Okay, so you mentioned that you feel like it's kind of too much on the affirmative side at the moment. A lot of these things like kind of feel like a pendulum. What way do you feel like the pendulum is swinging? Do you feel like it's swinging kind of more towards the affirmative still, or do you feel like it's coming back?
I mean, right now it's probably going a little bit more towards the affirmative, I guess. We'll see how the transport thing turns out, because I always like moves people towards the other side, so like back towards the right, I guess, on this. But
And then I guess like what kind of is the middle position?
I mean, I think the middle position is where like it seems to be that like trans people are real, and we probably should have like a way to oh my god, we should have like a way for everybody to like explore that in a safe area where they're not going to feel like persecuted or pushed too hard in one direction or another.
I feel like we're kind of stuck in like an impossible place. Like there is that like, hey, do we allow like especially youth to use puberty blockers and explore this more? And what will that look like? I heard there was something about like possible long-term effects, but I don't know specifically what those are. Do you have any idea?
Yeah, I mean, like all the research is like in its infancy still, right? So it's hard to say. But like different things relating to like IKEA or bone density or whatever. But it's hard to say again. All of that research is like super in its infancy.
Okay. And then I guess that's kind of where I stand on that. Do you have any questions for me on this topic?
I don't think so, unless you have like any like individual experiences or whatever related to.
No, I can't say that I have. I feel like I wasn't able to convey my point in a way that I would have liked to you, so I apologize.
No, that's okay.
I'm a little curious though. What's going on with Anna? I was gonna say I was really proud of you for how you turned around on like treating mental illness in that case, and it sounds like there's a whole bunch of stuff going on with her at the moment.
I mean, like none of it is perfect, right? Like people always like can fall back into old habits every now and then. Like it happens, right? You don't like cure something in a day, or like somebody get over a thing in a day, right?
Oh, okay. So yeah, and it sounds like you're handling it in a very good way. You're just keeping back, and it sounds like you're trying to discourage any challenges from people.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, all right. Well, anything else, sir?
No, I think that's all for the moment.
Okay, cool. Well, hey, thanks for the conversation.
Yeah, appreciate it. Have a good one.
Yeah, bye. Hello, sir. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. You want to introduce yourself?
Oh yeah, sure. Well, I'm trying to remain anonymous. But my screen name is Second Stage 1983. I'm a licensed mental health therapist on the West Coast, and I've been working with children, adolescents, and like young adults.
Okay.
Close to 10 years now. Yeah. So I have a private practice where I specifically see adolescents and young adults to about like age 25. I try to be really specific with who I see, because you kind of have to in this field. So yeah, I've had my own practice for about I'm gonna say like 5 or 6 years now.
Okay.
So I'm not like, so I'm obviously kind of nervous. This is the first time I've done something like this, and like I've said before, you never know exactly.
Yeah, you're good. Just no personally identifying information. You should be fine.
Okay. Awesome. So I had a really important question to ask you.
Oh boy. Okay.
What is your favorite Christian post-hardcore band
Under Oath.
that you listen to? Under Oath.
Why are you asking me this? Does Emery count as like post
Yeah.
hardcore? Does Emery count as that?
Yeah.
It probably
I guess you could say
actually
that.
would be Emery over Under Oath then.
Okay.
Did like every Christian Catholic fucking kid grow up listening to this shit? Is that?
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Well, yeah, totally. I went to like a Christian university, and I wasn't. I'm Protestant, not Catholic, but
Gross. But okay.
yeah. I actually find I mean where I'm at in my like stages of faith, like there's a lot of stuff that I find awesome about kind of like the tradition of Catholicism, but
Mm-hmm.
that's neither here nor there.
Okay.
I run a podcast actually where I talk to people in these bands, not specifically for like just the Christian scene, just like
Mm-hmm. that
entire little genre. So I heard you say Under Oath, and one time, and I was like, oh, that's pretty funny.
Gotcha. All right.
Where do you want to start? Do you want to ask me questions? Do you want to?
Well, how about you? What did you contact me to talk about?
Okay, so I initially contacted you to talk about, I've been doing this for about, bless you.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing this for about 10 years now, and so I've kind of been through the entire, I guess like spectrum, or the entire length of children adolescent work where
Mm-hmm.
we started to kind of see this rise in gender identity and trans issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so like it's really interesting, and I have some perspective, I feel like, on that. And I would say that I'm LGBTQ affirming. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I see people in my practice like that. But there's always been something that's kind of bothered me recently when I talk to any of my clients who identify,
Mm-hmm.
and that is the amount of people I just simply ask a question, and I say like, okay, did you decide or did you feel like this
Before.
Yeah, or just like how? Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm really bad at formulating thoughts.
No, I understand. I imagine that like one of the things I've asked this question to therapists in the past. I just talked to another guy that I think earlier was a therapist, although I'm not 100% sure. But I always have this question of like, let's say that you get somebody coming in and somebody's like, "Hey, how's it going, therapist?" You're like, "Hey, what's up?" And they're like, "I think I have general anxiety disorder." And you're like, "Oh, well, that's interesting. Like, how do you know that?" And then they tell you like verbatim like the 8 points off like the DSM-5.
Right.
And you're like,
Yeah.
"Oh no."
Yeah.
If that's not it, like
Yeah.
half of our fucking early sessions is probably going to be me trying to talk you down from what you've already looked at, because
Right.
like you're going to have a very strong like confirmation bias that
Yes.
it's this particular
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah. And the
So
worry, I
when-
imagine, as you're trying to say, like with trans people, there might be some worry that you have some problem and you're not 100% sure what it is, which is common of actual trans people.
Sure.
But then you get exposed to something like, oh, fuck, maybe this is the answer, right?
Yes. So I've talked to middle school kids. I've talked the amount of people that I've just simply asked who talked to their parents about this, or like about questions about their identity or any of those things, or any sort of like authority figure, right? Like mentor or something like that, before they came out. And it's been 100% no one. And so
Wait, say that again. So they haven't talked to anybody, or repeat that sentence again?
yeah, sorry. They haven't talked to anybody except doing their own research.
Okay, gotcha.
And then coming out to the people in their lives.
Okay, sure.
And so while I respect a lot of that, like in a therapeutic realm, you kind of start to wonder, because like I practice a very specific form of therapy, which is called relational psychodynamic. So we're focusing less on like, I would say, specific symptom relief, and more so about like how people engage with the world and what their relationships are like and how that they affect them. And so it's always kind of been a question in my mind, like, and I'll say this in session to them. I'll be like, so, why didn't you talk to your parents? I try and explore that, right? It's never been an issue of like, well, I just didn't think my parents would accept me, or I didn't think, because the parents have been accepting like 100% of the time.
They have been accepting 100% of the time?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you live like in a really progressive area, or?
Yes.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
In a very, very progressive area.
Okay.
But essentially, I'm like, so let me get this straight. Like, you didn't really talk about it. You didn't like say it like, hey, I'm feeling this way. Like, what do you guys think about that?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, they were like, no, I just did some research. And I was like, so, basically like random people, it wasn't people that you quote unquote trust.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But it was just people on the internet.
Sure.
And to me, when I start to push back on some of this stuff, some people are cool, but there's a lot of people who just straight up dip out, who are just like, I'd never hear from again.
Sure.
And it seems to be the case that I have to watch my words very, very carefully when I'm talking about this subject with people. Some people are really cool about it, but it's my job as a therapist to push those things, right? To push those ideas, not in like a dogmatic way or anything like that, but ask questions about it. And it seems to be less and less the case that it's like they come in with this idea of themselves, want to work on not even very specific things. They're just kind of like, well, I'm just kind of like dealing with this, that, and the other. And then as soon as the push on that starts, and it's not even a hard push, it's a very like, empathetic, caring, informational type of thing, people will dip out. And I guess I've seen it more with that community than I have in other instances of therapy.
Sure.
And so it's difficult because like the thing that I find too is that obviously the psychological community is supposed to be is incredibly accepting and that, but I also find other therapists kind of chattering, especially about the adolescent population, of like, I don't know what's going on here. Like,
something that's really challenging about this particular topic that I don't want to say I complain about it, but something to be of note is that because the framing on a lot of these issues has become about like gender, the ability to challenge somebody on those issues strikes at a way more fundamental like identity level. Like if somebody comes in and they say like, I have ADHD, TH, or whatever the type is, they say that. If you challenge them on that and you're like, it might not be that, then it's like I imagine you get some people who probably get annoyed, like, I know I have ADHD or whatever. But like for the most part, you're not challenging like a very like an untouchable part of their identity. Like, okay, like it's not, generally. But with the gender stuff, I feel like it gets way more difficult because it all gets kind of like wrapped into these identities that are very like fundamental to who you are. A challenge of that is interpreted as an attack, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's really hard when you're trying to get the essence of somebody and you're trying to like really kind of explore that in my field. And like one thing about teenagers too is like, obviously I'm 38, so I don't think of myself as 38, but like they obviously see that.
Yeah, of course.
And there's kind of like a power dynamic that I sometimes forget, right? That like I'm an adult talking to like a teenager.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I totally get that. It's just been really hard like navigating. Right? And I think in the very beginning, when we started to see in the psychological community, at least where I was, we didn't really start seeing this kind of stuff until about, I want to say like 2014, 2015 ish. And then it was like a very rapid increase. And I've had other conversations with therapists where it seems sometimes, and this is not 100% or anything. I'm not, quoting any research.
Yeah, it's clinical. I understand. We're on the clinical side right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Where it feels like the identity is kind of used to kind of cloak inner struggles or just inner turmoil. Whether that be trauma or whether that be anxiety or just even like social issues. and I've also seen a large amount of people who identify as LGBTQIA. Like, there's questions about, are they on the spectrum or not? Which, I don't know, makes sense to me, right? Because it's like you don't necessarily fit within society.
When you say on the spectrum, do you mean ASD? So I understand what you're
yes.
saying. Okay, gotcha. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. To me, there's been a large correlation, and it makes sense to me, right? Like, everybody's trying to find their identity and the ways that they fit in.
Okay.
So, I mean, in general, that's...
Obama.
I mean, that was just kind of what I wanted to talk about. But I also... I've been watching you for quite a while, and I'm a big fan. I just see so much bad information on Twitch and TikTok and other platforms about mental health.
Yeah.
And it has me like super duper concerned about who we're giving the mic to in general and how much influence. Because I think it, like, you probably know this, like, there's a bunch of TikTokers who are teenagers mostly who are like faking things like DID and that makes our job like 10 times harder. Right? Because it's like, if you come in, like you said, with a diagnosis that, like,
you've already read all the symptoms of, and you're starting to fit your behaviors into it. Yeah.
Right. And then, like, the psychologist or the therapist, I mean, it's just kind of like, why are you doing this? Like, what is this facilitating? Or like, what?
And the challenging thing, the thing is too, is that I think that one of the difficult things is that when it comes to mental health, like, if I go to the gym and I have a trainer from the gym, I'm not going there expecting to get a massage, right? I'm going there expecting to have a difficult decision to, like, a challenging experience to better myself. That's what I'm looking for. But it feels like there's kind of this increasing idea that when it comes to mental health, the way to deal with mental health socially is like infinitely accommodating the person. And that's like the new model is resist all challenges, and over accommodate everything. Because that's compassion, that's validating, that's which is horrible, right?
Yes, I and the thing is I'm in the therapy room, like, am I allowed to curse?
Yeah, you can say whatever you want.
Okay.
Well, no racial slurs, sorry, but yeah.
That's a given. Like, when I talk to people who I have good relationships with and working with for a long time, I'm just kind of like, you guys are fucked. like your resiliency is like
zero.
Terrible.
Yeah.
And there's people who are like, I know, like, I don't know, like, what, like, the people I see are more resilient because they're in there to say, like, how do I change myself? Like, how do I work on things about myself? But the world that they live in, especially the schools, because it's a super aggressive area, is just like, whatever you want to do it, type of thing. But that has been leading to more mental health problems, right? Because when you come up against resistance,
they crumble immediately.
Yeah, they crumble immediately.
That's something that I talked about even a long time ago. I don't know if it was as big a problem a long time ago, but like, I used to be a hardcore libertarian growing up, so some of these checks are gonna come from I think literally Penn Jillette. But like, I still agree that like college should probably be one of the most challenging experiences of your life, because it's the last time you truly have to be challenged in a really safe area, right? Yeah. If you go to college and you fuck up a little bit or whatever, like, it's fine. You're in college. Like, this is the time to make mistakes, and this is the time when you should be most challenged. Right. But it feels like, man, we are so afraid of challenging people at all that just, it can't be a thing. We have to over accommodate for everything, which is really bad, I think. Yeah. And then you end up with these people that are getting, like, when we're putting like trigger warnings on like world history courses, and it's like, really? Like, is this the direction that we're heading in? It seems a little ridiculous. Yeah.
So it's super interesting to me, because I have a friend who is a professor at the University of Arizona, and his intro English class is about just basically he can make it about whatever he wants, but he basically does like debate tactics and he runs the debate team there and stuff like that. And so I kind of talked to him about like this. We talk to each other a lot about this kind of stuff. What's really interesting to me is that like I've had to explain to him before, like we have different experiences because of where we're living. So he's like, I don't see these things in the university that you're kind of like talking about, and to say they don't exist, but like, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, like where I live, this is like huge,
more the norm,
you know? Yeah. So sometimes it's really hard to tell personally. It's like, okay, am I living in
a bubble?
Like am I living in the online world too? Like, is this as big of a deal? But when I see it creeping into the therapy room, that's kind of where I'm like, oh, no. Like,
yeah, the quantification of that has always been like really difficult because there's the constant like, oh, this is only a Twitter thing, it's only a Twitter thing, and it's like, I think that was true a while ago, but I'm not entirely sure now. I don't know what the reverse. Or go ahead. What did you say? I was
gonna say I also work with a lot of teen males, and there's just over the past couple of years there's been a lot of, especially for them, I think a lot of I don't know what the word would be, I would say just kind of stress, just in terms of like dating, in terms of just kind of like some of the not resiliency, but like some of the resistance they're coming up again, that they don't know when they should speak or they're white males, so they're just not really sure when they should speak or if they can, and that type of thing. And that's been kind of growing larger and larger, like that's coming into my practice, and it's not from a state of like, oh, I'm being oppressed or something like that. They're just kind of like, I don't know if I want to date like, or like I don't know how to engage in these different like things, and I don't know if I can express myself, whether that be race relations or dating or sex or anything like that. But it's starting to rise and really affect their mental health too. And so that's been like super interesting as well, and trying to kind of like, because they want so bad to be good allies, and it's kicking their ass though, like, and causing a lot of mental stress for them as well, because they're kind of like, I don't know where I fit in right now. Like I have a particular person who went to college, and I think I've had at least in the past like year or so that literally could not find a club for them at the school, because everything was either related to, LGBTQIA or, what do you say, minorities, that type of thing, where he's like, I don't know how to make friends. This person kind of struggles with like social things. He's like,
there were no like video game clubs or like sports thing. Really? There's like only,
I mean, that was their report. And being the area that they're in, I would not doubt it.
Okay. That seems a little harder for me to buy, because like there's probably still a lot of white males that go to school. I imagine. So like, I feel like there's probably some club that you can join, but sure.
Well, I mean, yeah, and I'm not gonna put that person on blast or whatever.
Yeah, of course.
I just kind of felt I felt bad, and he wouldn't be the only person who said something like this. Like, I don't know what clubs I can enjoy or join, and they're not specifically like, angry at like these other social clubs. They're just like, I just don't know where I can go with my interests. I should say that's probably their interests.
Sure. Okay, maybe, sure.
Especially in the STEM field. They have a particularly hard time finding like groups that aren't almost exclusively geared towards minority groups or gender and stuff like that.
Gotcha, sure.
yeah, so there's not like a huge point with that, but just it's just interesting to me that these things are kind of rising up, and that's just kind of like what the world that I live in at least is.
Sure.
Is kind of like, yeah. Is there anything you want to ask?
No, I mean, like I mean, these are all kind of things that I've been talking about. It's not like I'm going to disagree with anything you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, typically I would say if I'm a fan of yours, I probably agree with a lot of what you say. One thing that I just wanted to ask real quickly. One time I heard you say something. You're probably in passing, and you had said that the therapist's job is probably to validate that person.
No, I would never say that. Or what do you mean?
You were having a conversation with somebody, and I don't want to be very specific.
You can be super specific.
Well, you've kind of mentioned that you don't want this person mentioned.
Oh.
So
okay. Well, now you basically said it. You're talking about Anna. Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. Where I think she was relaying an experience, and you had said like, well, she probably thinks this because like her therapist.
Oh, I think if I can think more specifically, so one concern that I would have of somebody that's going to therapy, and that other person has an experience with me is that like, it's not going to be like, a therapist is probably not going to be there to tell you that like another person is like right and you're wrong or something.
Right.
So I feel like it's possible that if somebody engages with therapy in kind of a toxic way, that they might end up feeling like a therapist is validating their experiences.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
okay.
that's kind of my worry. Yeah, because
Gotcha.
I don't think unless you're going to house MD the therapist, your therapist is never going to be like, yeah, you're full of fucking shit. You're the abuser. You're like, a therapist is never going to say that to anybody, right? Like that's never going to happen. And I'm worried that like depending on the person going, they might implicitly think that therapist would support like other real life things, or whatever. That was like a worry that I would have depending.
Gotcha. Yeah. So yeah. Well, there's also like misinterpretations, right? On
exactly. Yeah.
What they're thinking, because like I've definitely this is what's awesome about teenagers is like I can be very direct, and like the first thing that I tell them in session is like if I think you're doing something fucking stupid, I will tell you that.
Obama.
You know, like it's so I think like confrontation. Especially like there's been times in sessions where I've just been like, dude, I don't know if I believe you, like straight up, I think that's part of the therapist's job.
Sure.
Is to kind of push back on some of that.
Sure. But to be clear also, when you say therapist job, this is going to be specific to your therapeutic model, and it's probably
Absolutely.
And it's going to vary from therapy, because I'm sure there are going to be some legitimate therapists that will maybe say like, well, actually I take a much more passive approach, or I avoid direct confrontation because I feel like it damages my rapport, or if I do direct confrontation, I'm more likely to lose a client who won't listen to me later on or something. Right? I'm sure there's like a ton of different ways to go. Yeah. But I understand what you're saying.
I would say that depends on the client.
For sure.
Right? Like you're always trying to tailor what you're doing to kind of meet that client's
Yeah,
needs.
hopefully, yeah.
Can I touch on one more thing that's just... can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go for it.
Do you think we make a lot of money?
A therapist?
Yeah.
No, I think that psych all the way up to PhDs, I think, are some of the lowest paying degrees, aren't they? Am I wrong on that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to say
just-
that like you need like a master's or something to be a therapist
Yes.
that makes like 50 or 60,000 a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my first job when I went into, I'll just be transparent, I went to about 80K of debt to get my master's degree. And the first job I got right out of school, because I was pre-licensure, because you like the process varies depending on state, but like it can take you 4 years to get your license.
Sure.
And like I don't know how many hours you have to have depending on the state. But my first job, and this was in 2012 or 2013, when I skipped out for a year and went to Philadelphia, and because my wife was going to a nursing program there. So I was working on a lower level, but like when I came back to where I was like originally living, my first job as a therapist, labeled as a therapist, was, I believe, maybe $15 an hour.
Okay.
And the expectation was, my client caseload was probably 60-ish. But I was also,
Jeez,
like,
60 a month,
yeah.
or?
Well, the client caseload, you were expected to see about 20 to 25 people
A week or a month, or how does that, what?
a week.
Okay, and the average therapy session is probably about an hour?
Ish, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, so this was also in community mental health, which is typically working with people who are on Medicaid, Medicare, who on the whole, you're kind of seeing, like, I don't want to say the worst of the worst, but you're seeing really fucked up stuff.
Yeah, the most downtrodden.
Exactly. So I think people have a real fundamental misunderstanding. It's like, yeah, if you come in here and you pay me, or, people think like therapists are killing it, making,
Because therapy
like,
is expensive, anywhere from $75
Right.
to $150 an hour. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And the reason that is because like the United States bases its legislation on the outcomes. So like insurance companies, they want to see results. So I have to tailor all my language to kind of making an insurance company happy. To get, you credential yourself with these insurances that may pay you. My highest pay insurance, I think, is like between 140 and 160, let's say. But I'm a small business owner, so 30% of that goes to taxes.
Yeah.
And then there's, expenses and like all that stuff. So in private practice, a therapist is, I don't know, full time is like 20 to 25 clients a week, and then you have paperwork, all that shit. But like when you work in community mental health, all your grant and funding comes from the government. So you get audited, you get like all this shit done. And what they want to see is that you're using evidence-based practices, and having desired outcomes. And like in the line of work that I do,
That can be really difficult.
yes, that can be incredibly difficult. And to me, it isn't particularly helpful to the client either. There's a lot of evidence-based practices that don't have long-term studies done about the effectiveness, say, past like a few years.
Sure.
So you end up treating the symptoms into sort of remission, but they come right back. So you haven't really like solved the entire problem. And I just kind of see it as like a fundamental flaw within our system. But yeah, we're paid really shitty. And that's why a lot of therapists are going to private pay, which like on principle, I take insurance because like I couldn't have gotten my own therapy without it.
Yeah, of course.
But there's a lot of, I think there's misconceptions about like just therapists and therapy in general. But yeah, I don't know. Any questions about that?
Not that I can think of.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I've heard most of these things before.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, anything else?
Not really. I just want to say I really appreciate you having me on. And there's not a lot of other streamers, I think, who would do that. But
Yeah.
also, I really, really think your voice is needed in terms of like mental health, because man, I've heard some really bad things, and every single thing that you say is either backed up with research or it's just like right on.
Didn't say Simon Says.
Sure.
So I appreciate that as a therapist and somebody who advocates for mental health.
Yeah, it seems like You mentioned the lack of resiliency thing. It seems like we're headed in a really negative direction, and I don't see that course reversing. Why do you think that is? I'm curious.
Okay. I think about this a lot. One theory I have is something I would call like trauma parenting.
Okay.
I feel like there's like an overcorrection by parents to make up for the mistakes of their parents. Like each generation should be getting better at parenting, right? Should be in an ideal world. I think there's a lot of people who overcorrect for the mistakes that their parents did. So if it's like, okay, if somebody, let's say their parent wasn't very was loving but like not overly affectionate, or like call it projection. Like there's a lot of projection, I think, of like a person's own childhood or like the parent's childhood onto those children. And so they're like, I had hurt feelings, this hurt me, I want to make sure that this doesn't happen to you. But there's like a really fine balance in that.
Yeah.
Because you need to have adversity, right, in order to get past things. And one of the biggest things I see is like parents are not willing to let their kids fail.
Yeah.
At all. And it's like failure is necessary because the message you're giving them is you're not competent. You can't handle this. So to me, it feels like there's like, yeah.
I don't remember what it was. I don't remember if this was a study or just an article that I'd read. But it was a whole thing about, I read a whole bunch of random shit because I have a kid and I was curious, whatever.
Yeah.
But it has to do with letting your kid like explore and fail or whatever. And it's like, fuck, I don't remember what I was gonna say. But it's something like a child should be allowed to explore and a child should be allowed to fail. And the child should be like, you'll support him through the failure, but you won't help him avoid the failure. There was like a whole write-up on like how you're theoretically supposed to help like a child like navigate these environments. But shielding your child from all adversity is just like a really negative thing to do, and it only makes really bad outcomes.
Yeah, and I know there's this like meme too of, right, like you know, everybody gets a participation trophy, right? Like on a more meta level, it's like you don't cheer everything your child does. It's like if you read like psychological literature on parenting and stuff like that, it's like there are certain expectations you should have for your child. And like, okay, like right now we're potty training my son. And so like one thing we were reading was like, you don't give excessive praise for things they're supposed to do. Sure. Right. You can give encouragement, you know, but it's not like if you make a big fanfare about it, it's like, no, this is kind of like the expectation I have that you do. Otherwise it becomes one of those things like I deserve lots of praise when I'm doing something that I'm expected to do. Yeah. So, and the amount of times I've like sat with parents in here and been like, I know you're afraid that your son's going to fail out of high school. You got to let him. Like, you just, like, he needs to experience some sort, like, you can't just swoop in, like, and try and save everything. They need to learn how to advocate for themselves.
Yeah. And it sucks because something that I have seen happen personally with like kind of family friends or friends of other families is they learned that the parents will learn that lesson, but when they learn it, it's when the child has become an adult. It'll be like they're 23, they don't have a job yet, they got arrested for the second time doing drugs. Like, I'm gonna kick him out of the house and he's gonna learn now. And it'll come to that basically. And it's like, yeah, that's what you have to do now. But like, imagine if they would have learned that lesson when they were like 12 or 13, instead of like 23 and 24, you know?
Yeah, they don't have the skills at that point, right? Like, like part of parenting is like, we say this a lot in working with children and adolescents, is like, kids in general want to do well. They just don't necessarily always have the skills to do it. So the skills need to be taught. So if you come in and swoop and you're like, oh, just let me take care of this for you, like, there's a real one, they don't get to learn that skill. and then two, like I feel like they get the subconscious message of like you're not capable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really cripples people later on in life.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I mean that's kind of like my take on why there might be a rise in that. It's not a very like research based one.
Mm-hmm. Something that I feel pretty strongly about is I don't know, I think this might be a bit of a social media thing, and then it kind of goes along with the excessive validation thing, but like I think it's super okay for kids to be like cringe and like ultra woke and all of that. Like I think that's part of growing up. Like we do
Absolutely.
that. Like I had a super cringe phase in high school and college. But the thing was that like people would tell me, and I fucking hated hearing it. Like people tell you like, hey, like you're a kid, like you're fucking dumb, you're a kid, you don't know anything, okay? And it's like, well, fuck you, like I'm fucking 19, I know everything there is to know about the world, right? And people tell you you're cringe, you'll grow out of it. It's like, no, fuck you, I won't. And then you do, right? You turn 24, 25, you're like, okay, holy shit, I was cringy, I was a horrible freshman, I was a bad high school, right? And you learn. But now it feels like you can't, that isn't happening anymore. There is like an infinite validation that, like, I always joke about this, that if I would have started streaming like in high school or right out of high school, I would just be the worst person in the world.
Right, well, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because I feel like whatever I believed then, that would have been like, boom, like super pegged in as like a permanent, this is who you are. Because holy fuck, how could I not be? To be that arrogant as a 19-year-old to get all that validation externally?
Oh, yeah.
And
I mean,
that's a problem, I think.
I think there's real deep issues just in terms of like addiction as well. Like to that kind of attention. And like when I look at some of like larger YouTubers and things like that, like this is not a diagnosis, but I'm like, man, you have to be like super manipulative and like kind of sociopathic to like manipulate people in these ways. Not like an actual like antisocial personality disorder, but just this kind of feeling of like I need this, or like there's no the validation that it creates is like it's like a feedback loop, right? Like it's just like you just keep getting like the yes queen or like what like whatever going on, and like that's the world that you live in. And it becomes, especially on social media, where it's like, hey, maybe this person's behavior is not great, or maybe how you're modeling for other people, for children, for different things, and then it's like, why are you attacking them? Like people just like slow down. Like so yeah, I totally get what you're saying. We just don't know, I guess, like the far-reaching implications. Like,
yeah, well, I mean, we're arguably starting to see it in like college kids and beyond, but I mean, it's always hard to tell, because when we talk about psychology, we're so many abstractions removed from like a basical, like chemical interaction, that it's always hard to say like what's causing what, like everybody wants to blame, rising, like mental health problems on whatever their pet issue is. But
right.
Yeah, it does seem like we're like significantly less equipped to deal with any adversity, any altering opinions or differing opinions, any sort of workplace challenges. Like this is getting worse and worse and worse, but everybody wants to accommodate that. Like,
I know, I don't understand it either.
Yeah, I
don't know if it's because of like the ability of like the internet to spread into like mob mentality, or like when you feel like you have people behind you, right? Like
you have like a righteous calling.
Yeah, it's like a righteous self-indignation, right? Like the idea of nuance, or that things are complicated, is
offensive.
Yes.
Sometimes.
Yeah, I don't understand that. Like at the base, because like in my job, like I have to work with the nuance, right? Because when we even label like type of thinking or thinking patterns in people, black and white thinking is not a good thing. It leads to more mental health distress. Yeah. When there's strict black and white thinking. Yeah. And it limits your ability to engage with people.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I agree. Yeah. Yeah. What else? I think Yeah, I feel like we probably agree on most of the stuff.
That probably, yeah, I'm sure we do. Well, I just wanted to say thanks again. I can let you go here. I really appreciate it.
Do you? I'm curious. In your practice,
Yeah.
do you find that like when you start challenging people, are they likely to like therapist shop? Do you see that a lot, or are these like referred to you by other people, and you're kind of like they have to see you, or?
No, I'm not referred in that way. These are like more or less organic searches,
Gotcha.
like on the internet, like how I market myself and stuff like that. I find teenagers way easier to work with than adults.
Gotcha.
I just do. They're a little bit more flexible in terms of like having stuff set in stone, or even having diagnoses set in stone. Because like a lot of, even personality disorder stuff starts after 18.
Sure.
Or like that's where like it's supposed to be labeled by. But the ingrained patterns they're not completely ingrained yet. And so you're not like working backwards from, say, like 20 to 30 years of operating in some specific manner. So yeah, and it's also really difficult being a male in this practice as well.
Why do you say that?
Unique challenge. We're few and far. We're kind of few and far between. I would say, as a business model too, like a lot of the times we get the referrals of like, hey, this is my angry son, like do something with him. Which I don't do. I don't like dealing with that.
Or wait, what do you mean? What is the implication of that? What do you mean by that?
Oh, so I'm not really good with anger management. Like I know my own skill set. And also most of the time when there's anger dealt with, like the kid doesn't want to be there. And part of my model is like, if your kid does not want to be here, or doesn't want some sort of change in their life, then I don't want them in my office.
Gotcha. Okay.
For their sake, to be honest with you, because like there might be a time when they really want to reach out to a therapist, and they remember that one time their parents forced them to go to somebody, and nothing gets done. Like nothing gets done. If you were sitting in a place where you didn't want to be,
Because the therapy is kind of like, it's not like a hospital where somebody can do something to you. You kind of have to be an active participant for it to be effective, right?
Absolutely. And that's the difference between doctors and like I tell this to people. It's like you when you go to a doctor, there's like a set thing of like, okay, you do this, and this, bam, like you're good, right? Like we have like medicine, we have all this stuff to kind of like treat it, or just like A plus B equals C, like in terms of like a medical model. And like in psychology, it's like, okay, well like A connects to Z, which kind of connects back to B. Like it's just all over the place. It's a very different practice. Yeah.
Gotcha.
But do you mind if I talk about one more thing?
Plug your practice? No, I'm just kidding.
No.
No, I'm just fucking. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go for it. Yeah, what's up?
No. I was just like in terms of it being harder for males. I think it's something like 10. It's women are 10 times more likely to like walk through a therapist's office than males are. So, and there's some people who don't give a shit what gender you are, or like whatever, but there are in a heavily dominated female clientele and a heavily dominated female practice, I guess, in like a job, you're probably less likely to get clients, because a lot of the times women will want to speak to women about things because they're lived experience.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah.
Versus guys. Yeah. So that made I watched a lot of my colleagues who were females fill up way faster than I did. And that could be also because like they just took anybody. But it took me a long time to fill up my practice. And
sure. Is it mostly men you see, or is it a disproportionate amount of men you see?
No, it's actually I would say it's pretty close to like a 60-40.
Gotcha.
60% men, 40% women.
Mhm.
Probably a pretty smaller amount of gender spectrum
Mhm.
people as well. So yeah, it's just I've worked in environments too where I think it's weird because you hear a lot about men in the workplace, and when you're working in a female heavily dominated industry, like you kind of get misrepresented or mislabeled. And what I mean by that is like I can be really passionate when I'm talking about. I can be, very knowledgeable, and the way that I talk about things, like it's not like anger, but it gets misinterpreted as like aggressiveness.
Damn, are you like screaming about your?
No, that's the thing. It's like if yeah, yeah, and so that can be kind of difficult, because you're just like I'm just talking about what I know, and that's not like I there's a lot of wonderful people that I know and therapists that I know. Hot take: I really hate hanging out with therapists, but I do not find them I find them very weird. Yeah, there's a lot of nice people that I know, or therapists that I know, who are supportive. But I mean, yeah, we're a weird bunch, for sure.
Sure. Yeah. Well,
That's it.
Okay. Well, hey, listen.
Well,
if
I
anything,
appreciate you.
Yeah, if anything comes up, feel free to let me know. If you
Yeah,
ever hear if something specific comes up related to like therapy or anything like that, you can also DM me if you feel like you have some insight or something. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Have a great time. Sorry about the Twitch stuff.
No, it is what it is.
Oh, one last question.
Yeah,
how is Elden Ring going?
It's a fun game. I mean, if you liked any of the other Dark Souls games, you'll like this Dark Souls game. Seems to be how most of them go. So.
Never played a Dark Souls game, so.
Oh, well, then I don't know if you'll like it or not. You might hate it.
All right, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Have fun. Peace out.
Yeah. Yeah. You too.